What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. I know that I said I was probably going to take a week or two off to work on the Lexus, which I've been working on the Lexus, but Terry's not here. I'm actually off work today, and whenever he's not going to be working on his car, I'm not going to work on it without him being here because it's his car. So I'm going to focus on the Veloster when I got some downtime. So let me flip the camera around and show you what I'm working on today. So currently what I'm doing is this wiring right here is the wiring that has to go into the firewall on the back side of the Veloster, and it goes down into the cabin. And then I've got the ECU up here, my front brake lines, and then I'm looking at how the ABS controller is going to mount in here. And that's where it was originally located in the Genesis. In the Veloster, it was back in that corner, but I'm using the Genesis controller since there's a recall on the Veloster ABS controller. Solves that problem right there. So this is where it's supposed to originally mount, but I still have to move this back a little bit. So I'm gonna have to shift this back maybe an inch or so and get it to sit about there, which will make me have to shorten these lines ever so slightly, but I should be able to modify them enough to where I can still make them work without any issue. As it stands right now, if I put it right where it was originally, all this stuff bolts right back in, no issue, lines right up the way that it's supposed to. I haven't done the wiring harness yet. That's what I'm getting ready to check, is to make sure that's going to fit, make sure the power control center box is going to actually mount, so that big box right there. Make sure all that stuff's going to actually fit in here the way that it's supposed to fit in here, and then without any interference with anything. And then I can continue on with trying to fit the radiator in here and the AC condenser to make sure they're going to fit in here. And then I'll, once I know that they'll fit in the front end, then I'll start modifying the frame rails to fit the front end. Because if not, I'm going to have to see if I've got to modify this. And if I got to modify this, then it may change how I have to modify the front of the frame rails. So I want to get the radiator fit into the core support before I go modifying the frame rails any further to get the core support mounted to the front of the frame. All right, so the ECU fits, but it's hitting the top right here when the connector's on it. So I'm gonna have to figure out how to modify either the bracket or the bottom of the car to get the ECU to mount. But I got the main wiring harness in. I'm still working on fitting everything, but that's first not major issue, but first issue that I've come across. So we'll see how it goes. All right, everybody, so now what I'm working on is I'm gonna try and fit the radiator into the core support. I already know that the core support is too narrow top to bottom. Side to side, it's got enough room, but the AC lines are hitting right here. So I'm not sure what I'm gonna do about that, but I still need to take an inch off the front of the frame rails so that I can weld my mounts, which are right there, onto the front of this frame rail so that I can mount the core support to the frame rail. Because right now, the only thing holding the core support up is the bolt going into the fender and the other bolt going into the fender and then the headlights. And then just the weight of it sitting against the frame rails. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull the headlights back out of here and pull the subframe, or pull the core support off. I'm gonna cut the front of the frame rails, get those set where they need to be set, put the core support back on here and make sure it's going to sit where it needs to sit before I weld anything in. Once I verify that it's going to sit correctly, then I'll weld everything in, and then I can start fitting the radiator. Because right now, what looks like I'm going to have to do is I'm more than likely going to have to trim the bottom of this panel. Now, I don't want to cut the whole center of it out because I want to keep some of the structure between the two sides. So I think what I'm going to do is just cut out this back portion and leave this front piece all the way down and leave it connected. I know it's not a lot, but it'll keep it supported somewhat. And then I'll make a bracket to go underneath it to sit where the bottom of the radiator needs to sit. And I'll have mounts underneath the radiator that are fixed to the end of the core support. But I need that opened up so that I can get the radiator to sit in there correctly. Plus, I'm going to have to trim off these ears on the back because they're going to hit the subframe on both sides. So I got to modify it anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and take this apart, get the front of the frame rails ready to weld the brackets on, and then I'll start trimming this to get it to fit. So I've been working on getting the front core support to fit, and I trimmed the front of the frame rails, trim them down to get them right on the face of the subframe. I've got the old frame rail front for the Veloster, and I'm not going to leave this on here. I've just got it there to kind of help me hold it in place on both sides. That will eventually wind up getting removed, because this plate right here that the front bumper and the core support mount to is going to get welded to here. I'm going to put a steel plate over top of the front of this to fill in between the edge of this plate and the edge of the frame rail. I'll fill that in with a piece of flat steel. But I'm going to wind up welding all this in, and then I'll get rid of this back here. I'll probably leave a 45-degree gusset on it, but the rest of it will be gone. And mostly I have to get rid of it on this side because where the ABS controller sits. This side, not so much, other than I got to make sure I still have room for my air intake, but I don't want to leave all that material in there anyway. I just want a small gusset on there to give it some strength. And I may even make a small gusset for right up here in the front, make it pretty steep angle, and just have it welded down right here. But essentially I've got the front core support sitting where it's supposed to be sitting. It's pretty flat with the front of the car. Now I did notice that now that I have the core support sitting where I want it to, I'm kind of worried about the geometry of the wheel hitting the core support if I hit full suspension stroke. I may wind up having to modify this, because let me flip the camera around. So I'm sure some of you are wondering why I'm trying to fit the Genesis suspension in here versus using the Veloster suspension, which I could have done. There's many different ways that I could have done this project, but the reason that I want to do the Genesis front suspension is because I want to be able to put a steering angle kit on here, because this thing's going to be a pretty good drift machine in my opinion. I'm not a drifter. I've never drifted in my life, but I'd like to try. And this car is just a toy. I'm not building it for drifting. I'm not building it for drag racing. I'm building it for fun. Pure unadulterated fun. That's the only reason I'm building this. And to make sure that just to test my abilities and see what I'm capable of doing. With that being said, I'm trying to keep the Genesis suspension on here because they offer a high angle steering angle kit so that I can do drift with this. Now that may not be what I wind up doing with it, but I want the ability to do it if that's the route that I choose. When I originally set out to build this car, my intention was to build it to run drag races, which I'm probably still going to do. But I'd like to see what the capabilities of the car are, and if it's got enough power to weight ratio to where it rips the rear wheels loose pretty freaking easy, then it may make a really wicked drift machine. I know absolutely jack shit about drifting, but be something for me to learn on and be another avenue for me to explore. I'm always up to learn anything that will help me in working on cars and driving them, and just the overall experience. This is really my only hobby, so anything that I can do to increase my fulfillment and joy out of this hobby, I'm going to pursue. So just wanted to let y'all know that's why I'm doing this. No other reason other than pure unadulterated fun. All right, guys, it's a little dark out here, but I've been working on trying to fit the front bumper onto the car without it hitting the wheels. So I just did a rough cut right here. This is not the final cut because I'm not even going to use this bumper. This is just so I can see how everything's going to work. Because I don't care what happens to this bumper. It is what it is. So I just cut a pretty decent chunk out of both sides. There's my dash. I'm still working on it. But cut that piece off of the driver's side and matching piece right there off the passenger side. So cut both of those pieces off. Now I'm going to go see if it'll fit with the tire where it is. So you can see it's dark out there, but I'm gonna keep fucking with this thing and see if I can get it fitting. All right, everybody. So now my wheel is gonna stick out from the side of the bumper. I actually kind of dig it. Both of them obviously should be sticking out the same, which they are. But I didn't cut it too aggressive, so it's still got to come forward a little bit. But I should be able to essentially stop it right there and then just fill this in, and it should be right. It'll make it look like it's supposed to be. I dig it. I just got to go forward a little bit more right here on this, maybe start here and go out another 1/2 inch. But what I'm actually going to wind up doing is I will bolt a fixture onto the center of the hub and set it to where it's 2 inches bigger than the diameter of the tire. And then I'll just swing it and mark it with the center of the rim. That way I know I'll get an exact arch to match the wheel. But I think that's gonna work, and I think it's gonna look pretty freaking aggressive when I get the whole thing done, because I think I'm actually gonna go with a little bit wider tire. I know I'm going with a wider tire on the back, but I think on the front I'm gonna go with a little bit wider tire. And then if I do that high steering angle kit for the drift, that thing will be mean as shit when them tires are slung out one way or the other. And then with the wide body fender kit that I'm gonna do on here, this thing's gonna be mean. So I don't know, I'm digging how this is turning out. All right, so now you can see a little bit better now that it's daylight out here, how much room I have, or lack of room, for clearance for the tire. So I still gotta trim this out. I need to come out probably another inch. I haven't measured it, but I think I've got enough room behind everything where nothing's gonna be exposed. The only part that would worry me is right here, but I think I'm 2 inches away right here, so I wouldn't need to go up any higher. I think it needs to start about right here and go out. So, not too bad. Then I can fill in the back. But everything's lining up pretty decent. Front end looks really good. Now you can see how much the tire's sticking out on the front end. So, I don't know. We'll see. All right, everybody, I'm back out here working on the Veloster again. Gonna make some plates to put on the front of the frame rails so that I can weld the core support to the plates and weld all that to the frame rails. Once I get that done, then I'm gonna start fitting the radiator. So, show you what I'm doing. So I have some leftover pieces from where I shortened the frame rail. This is the piece of metal that I cut from the frame rail. There's the other corresponding piece. I need to cut out a little notch so that this bolt has clearance behind it. But essentially, it's gonna sit up in behind there, and it'll come out flush with the end of here once I cut that notch in there for that bolt. And then I'll have this tab overlapping so that I can actually weld it to the top of here. And then, yeah, I should have some pretty good support and a good cap on the end of that thing. And then once I get that burnt in and get this sealed into that plate, then I'll unbolt the core support and finish burning this in to the frame rail. All right, now that I have those held into place and I have the bracket for the core support welded to the front of this plate, just tacked in several places, and then I've got it tacked in the center on both sides. So now I'm going to remove the core support. I'm going to burn that the rest of the way in, trim it up. I'm gonna actually completely clean this up and get it ready to put some primer on it. I'm actually going to primer the end of this. So yeah, I'll have it completely done up when I come back. All right, guys, it started raining on me, so I had to give up on working on the Veloster. You can see the front ends off of it right now. But I haven't been able to work on much on the Lexus either. Terry went and got the last electrical connector that we need to hook up the relays for the transmission. And then we have the exhaust, 12 inch of pipe welded onto the exhaust. Got the fuel lines on there and whatnot. So hoping to start it today, but it started raining, so I don't know if we're going to or not. And I was working on the Veloster, and I'm getting ready to start tearing the Impala apart. I got my crane overhead so that I can start pulling the engine and transmission. I'm gonna get the transmission rebuilt. I'm gonna regasket the original LT1 that's in there, but I'm gonna get that car back on the road. It's been sitting for about 15 years, So I just want to go through it. I want to put new clutches in the transmission, new torque converter, and I want to re-gasket the entire motor. So, and I just want to check it out, make sure everything's still good, make sure there's no rust in it or anything like that. So I'm going to start working on that one here shortly. So between working on the Lexus and working on the Impala, I may slow down a little bit on the Veloster, but I'm still getting a lot done. So I'm going to try and kind of fumble between multiple projects here and see what I can get going. All right, so I've been cleaning up the front where I welded the uprights on. I haven't gotten to where I'm ready to paint them yet, but I want to get the core support fit and the radiator fit before I do any of the finish work. I don't want the engine in here when I'm doing all that, so I just cleaned it up so that I could get the core support to fit better. Now I'm going to put the core support back on, and I'm going to try and fit the radiator. And I've been mulling around the idea of trying to use a oversized Veloster radiator so that I don't have to cut the core support, but I'm going to see if that'll work or not. So we'll see what happens. All right, so I went ahead and put the headlights back in. I've got the core support bolted to the front of the frame rails, and now I'm going to go look and see if the Veloster radiator will even freaking come close to working, and then I can just do an oversized core for a turbo Veloster, and it should work. All right, so the Veloster radiator actually fits with the fan, and it looks like there's plenty of clearance. I may have to remove the overflow tank and just move it somewhere else, but that overflow tank's no good anyway, so I'm not worried about it. But it looks like this will work. The only issue is the Veloster has a remote water neck, so I may have to add that in. Oh, and I don't have it anymore. I sold my freaking engine. I don't think I have that piece. Uh-oh. All right, anyway, I'll figure something out. But the other thing that I was saying about the radiator is if there's a radiator they should offer a radiator that's bigger, because the radiator mount on this car, the pin is going from that one to that one, and there's still another hole over there. So I should be able to get a bigger radiator. I'm willing to bet the turbo radiator is bigger than the naturally aspirated. So I should be able to get a turbo radiator, and it'll be bigger. And then an upgraded turbo radiator, and that should provide enough cooling for the V6. All right, everybody. So based off my research that I've been doing for the last couple hours, it looks like a 2012 Hyundai Elantra GL radiator will be the correct size for the oversized holes that are already in the core support, and it will only be I think it's like 1.5 inches shorter on the height versus the Genesis radiator, but the dimensions of the radiator are the same as far as the core dimensions. For width and for thickness, it'll just be the height. It'll be about 1 inch to 1.5 inches shorter, which I think I can deal with. I may see if I can find an upgraded radiator for the Elantra, and then that'll make up for it with a thicker core. Losing 1.5 inches off the height, I think I would make up for it with the thicker core, because the core, standard core is 0.63 and the thicker core is 1 inch, so it's almost double the thickness. So I'm gonna see what I can come up with, but I'm fairly certain an Elantra radiator core is what's gonna work in here. And then I'll still have to add the remote filler, so I'll just go to the junkyard and get one. I already sold my motor, and I left the filler neck on there because I didn't think I was going to be using the Veloster radiator. But turns out I'm going to. Well, I'm not going to use the Veloster radiator, but I need the filler neck. So I'm going to have to go to the junkyard, get a filler neck. I'll order an Elantra radiator, or I might find one at the junkyard and test fit it before I go buying a brand new one. But I won't put a junkyard radiator on here. I'll put a brand new one on here. And then I'll have to figure out what I'm going to do with my fans. I may wind up having to use the Genesis fan. I may have to use an Elantra fan. I may have to hobble something together with the Veloster fan. I don't know. I'm hoping that I'll be able to modify the Genesis fan to make it work, but we'll see. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But that's where I'm at right now. I think that's where I'm going to stop. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up this video. If you guys like following along with the build, if you've been following along and you haven't liked or subscribed to my channel, please do so. It helps with the algorithm so other people can see my content. But if you like what I'm building in this series, like always, please like, comment, share, subscribe. Let your friends see what I'm doing. And I'll catch you in the next video. Have a great one.